how we live. The Total Faith Show. Come on, get your hands up. Everybody sing it loud. This is how we live. The Total Faith Show. Come on, get your hands up. Everybody sing it loud. This is how we live. The Total Faith Show. Total Faith.
Lifestyles, relationships, business, networking, ministry, community.
The Total Faith Show. Start the show.
Hello and welcome to the Total Faith Show. I am your host, Cynthia Smith, and I come each and every week into your homes, onto your television sets, your computer screens, your laptops, your iPhones and iPads, and all mobile devices, including on the World Wide Web, and we are now VOD with Dish Network. So with that said, I am just so privileged, and I am also honored to have in the studio with me today to talk about news, all right, information, because as you know who are watching, maybe not for the first time, but those of you who are watching for the first time, we produce lifestyle, entertainment, and news programs to inspire, to educate, and more importantly, to empower you to transform the way you think. And that way, if we can get you to think differently, we can get you to live differently. And the tagline for Total Faith Network is everyone wins at TFN. And today in the studio, we have two winners. Well, three winners, because I'm included. But we have with us in the studio Kenneth Chamberlain Jr., alongside with his attorney, attorney Mayo Barlett. That's it. And I'm just going to read his bio, if I may. Kenneth Chamberlain Jr. is a skilled human service professional who currently serves as program developer with the Urban League of Westchester, managing the Community Work Experience program. We'll talk a little bit about that when we speak with him. Kenneth is also one of the founders of the Westchester Coalition for Police Reform, and we will talk more about that as well, and it'll be real significant, which consists of community organizations, religious institutions, and individuals who share a vision of safe communities with improved community police relations and greater police accountability and transparency. That's key. It was November 2011 when the WC, and I would just phantom to say Westchester
Westchester Coalition.
Yeah, Westchester Coalition. They formed a response on the November 2011 killing of Kenneth Chamberlain Sr., which is our guest father, by a White Plains police officer at his home after his medical alert was triggered by mistake. Now, some of you may have heard about this story when it first broke some time ago, but we are here now to talk with his son and his son's attorney. Since then, Kenneth has become an important spokesperson for the coalition, connecting it with the larger movement. Okay, and we can go on and on about the Blacks in Law Enforcement of America. We can go on with the Bethel Baptist Church and the Delta Sigma and all of these organizations who have actually joined in to be a part of and supportive, right, of this very unfortunate and tragic occurrence that happened to your dad. Which, first, let's just digress for a moment, okay? You're sitting here. This is very timely, and I believe that the timing of God is so perfect. I believe that. So you're here now with your attorney, and I want you to just share, if you will, okay, what happened during that time with your dad, okay? I feel somewhat connected because You know, I've had tragedy in my family as well, and at the hands of police, right? But let's talk about your situation in terms of what happened, the non-indictment, right? Am I right about that? How did you feel about that? Can we just go right there? How did you feel about that? Because I know you're probably fighting a fight now. Am I right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So we're going to talk about, can we talk about that?
Or, we can to some degree.
To some degree. But let's just talk about, how did you feel about that non-indictment that came out?
Well, I think that
based on what evidence and facts were, or truth were.
I can simply say that in the beginning, when this situation happened, one of the things that I did not want to do is immediately lay blame on law enforcement and say that they were wrong. I even went so far as to say that if law enforcement, or if my father had done something to force law enforcement officers to have to act that way, then I would back off, I'd walk away, and just work on strengthening my family.
Sure.
But unknown to the police department, the LifeAid, the company that monitors the pendant, they record every pendant activation. So when law enforcement alleged that my father was the aggressor, that he posed an imminent threat to life or well-being, I tell people it was quite the opposite once we heard the audio. This is when we hear the mocking, the taunting, racial slurs, expletives being hurled at them. And this is why I say it was quite the opposite, that the police officers posed an imminent threat to life or well-being. But I still said this is not an indictment on all police officers, because you have good officers out there, officers that do great work. But the problem is that the individuals that committed the crime, they weren't held accountable. Instead, I say you circle the wagon around them and you protect them, you exonerate them, and then you allow them to go back into these communities and they commit these same acts over and over again. So for that to happen, and for them to come back with no indictment, I found it hard to believe, because I've challenged people to listen to the audio of the day my father was killed, and I challenged them to say that they cannot come back with a fact-based conclusion that there was misconduct or murder. So that failure to indictment makes me question what was presented to the grand jury. What did they actually tell these individuals in that secret proceeding for them to come back with no true bill? And this is why we need an independent prosecutor.
Now, Attorney Barlett, with your background, and I know a little bit about your history, you were once a defense attorney?
I'm a defense attorney now. I'm a former prosecutor. I was in the DA's office in Westchester County, which is the same district attorney's office which presented this matter to the grand jury.
Exactly.
I was a prosecutor there for almost 11 years.
Exactly. So you kind of know the ins and outs because of that background in and of itself, right? So with that said, what did you think about the fact of, as Mr. Chamberlain, as Kenneth has just stated, this secret, when they make this decision on this non-indictment?
I think that we have a problem in this country with the truth and with politics, and that's across the board. And you see it from the corridor of corruption through similar instances in federal arena as well as in our judicial system. And the key is that you cannot trust a district attorney's office and a police department to investigate and prosecute itself. Essentially, the DA's office works with those police every single day. The district attorney herself is a political figure in Westchester County, possibly with additional political aspirations, and is in a position where she repeatedly seeks the endorsement of police unions. So it's very difficult for her to go in and indict a police officer. And if you juxtapose what happened in Westchester County with Mr. Chamberlain with what happened in Baltimore, you look at the outrage that is being cast upon the Baltimore state attorney who's prosecuting those 6 police officers in Freddie Gray's death, and all of a sudden there's a call for independent prosecutors. All of a sudden the prosecutor can't be fair. The defendants, who happen to be police, feel they can't get a fair trial. And I can't say that they can or they can't. What I can say is that when you have a police department being investigated by and prosecuted by a district attorney's office or an attorney general's office, it gives the appearance that there's going to be a difficulty in being fair and impartial. Now, it's only when the police are the defendants that the prosecutor can't be fair and impartial. We asked from day one for an independent prosecutor, someone who would be able to come in and be a neutral arbiter. And the fact of the matter is that on the evening that Mr. Chamberlain, the early morning Mr. Chamberlain was killed, Commissioner Chong of the White Plains Police Department came in and immediately proclaimed that it was a justified shooting, stated that Mr. Chamberlain was outside running around with hatchets in his hand, and gave an impression to the public that everything was done that could be done to avoid Mr. Chamberlain being killed. He neglected to mention that this went on for about an hour and a half, that they were only at his home for a medical call. He certainly didn't mention that his officers called Mr. Chamberlain the N-word, that he was 68 years old with a heart condition, and that he never left his home that morning because the police broke into his house and ultimately killed him after taunting him. And failed to mention the fact that the LifeAid company actually called the police department asking for the police to leave, stating that Mr. Chamberlain was not in need of medical assistance. He further neglected to mention that Mr. Chamberlain actually called the White Plains Police Department himself, seeking assistance from the White Plains Police Department. So that's perhaps the most chilling part of the entire tape. When you hear all of these things, it tells you that there clearly are conflicts. It doesn't mean a prosecutor can't do that job, but it's so much more difficult that there's no need to put the DA's office, the police department, or the public through that. It's much cleaner to have an independent arbiter, someone who has no horse in the race.
Sure. So all of this time, there's not ever been that, and that's why we're legislating for something like that to take place. That's the whole reason to have an independent arbitrator.
And the independent arbitrator, really, the independent investigator and prosecutor ought to be in place anytime there's use of police force, because at the end of the day, it gives the community at least the belief that there's been a full and fair investigation. And of course, you still need to have checks and balances there. You're going to have to want to have someone who's a standing body with subpoena power, with the ability, a budget to have an office to investigate it. But when you do that, it prevents your Fergusons from happening.
Sure.
You know, and you want, as Mr. Chamberlain said, and to his credit, just if you put yourself in his shoes, who in the world would be able to say, I'm not angry with anyone, I'm not suggesting there was any wrongdoing, I just want to know the facts. I'm not blaming anybody. And when you stop to consider that if you had an independent arbiter, if you had accountability, the same accountability that all of us are going to have. If we do anything wrong, we're going to be held probably very strictly, because we're a very unforgiving society in the United States, very punitive until it's our family or us. Then all of a sudden it's not fair. But if you stop and think about how different it is when the police arrest someone. If you take the case in South Carolina when the man was shot in his back, there was no uproar, there was no, there certainly was outrage, don't get me wrong, but there was no protest in the streets, there was no looting, there were no fires, because the police department did what it was supposed to do. At that point, the prosecution actually arrested the officer.
So they did have an independent arbitrator.
They had the appearance of accountability. Now, again, that officer could end up being innocent, but ultimately that person's charged based upon probable cause, based upon having enough evidence to go forward and charge.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to talk about what are you doing now, Kenneth, moving forward, okay, in respect to, you know, knowing that this was not to be in vain, right? We will be right back. Do not tune away. It's a very sensitive time in terms of this program, but it's very important and it's key. You know, we have to begin to not only unify, come together, but we need to also have a voice, not just a voice, but a voice that's going to turn into action. And that's what Kenneth Chamberlain Jr. is doing along with his attorney, Mayo Barlett. And we'll be right back.
Attention, long-term exposure to the drug Almiron can cause maculopathy, an eye disorder affecting the macula and a major cause of blindness. If you took Almiron and suffered maculopathy or other serious eye damage, you may be entitled to compensation. Almiron is used to treat a condition known as interstitial cystitis, better known as painful bladder syndrome. In 2018, the American Academy of Ophthalmology noted that 6 patients recently treated experienced pigmentary maculopathy of unclear cause following chronic exposure to Almiron for interstitial cystitis. Symptoms of maculopathy include vision loss, yellowish lesions that form underneath the macula, and age-related macular degeneration. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with maculopathy after taking Almiron, call Almiron Justice now. You may be entitled to compensation.
Please call 800-378-0924. That is 800-378-0924.
And we are back with Mr. Chamberlain. Please talk now to us. You know, we understand that across the board, we know the problems across the board in this country. But we're talking about right now with this particular incident, if you will, this particular cry for you and what you're doing moving forward, you know, to not have this to be in vain.
Well, one of the things that we've done from the beginning when my father was killed was we formed the Westchester Coalition for Police Reform. It is a number of community and faith-based organizations that have come together to just, if I had to really say what our mission statement is, and I was speaking about this earlier, I would just simply say it is the belief in the golden rule, that you do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Very simply put, you know, it's nothing fancy about it. And we go out there and we try to work with law enforcement, elected officials, all in the effort to bring about the change, because we know it's going to take all sides working together to affect this type of change.
Absolutely.
And to our credit, one of the biggest forums that we've held so far was last year around November, and we did that with the assistance of the Urban League of Westchester. Our president and CEO there, Ms. Soraya Sampson, was the face of this police and community relations event that we coined Rebuilding Trust. Some people would say building trust because it's two different things.
Yeah.
Was there trust ever there in the community from the beginning?
Right.
You know, some will say yes and some would disagree. So either way, building trust or rebuilding trust is what we were looking at. And we've had several police chiefs who have come on board that want to help us push this initiative. We find that we had certain things in common. For instance, we were looking at the police body cams, that the law enforcement departments want them and the community wants them.
But
We found, I mean, the biggest issue what we see right now a lot of times is funding with them, getting the cameras, as well as storage. But I think that those are easy fixes. If the community comes together with law enforcement and we push and meet with our legislators. And
not to cut you off, but how are the elected officials responding to that?
Paul Feiner in Greenburgh has responded wonderfully, and Chief McNerney in Greenburgh, Chief of Police, have really been great leaders when it comes to this, and they've expressed an interest in getting it for all of the officers in the department. So we've had a number of police officers, even some local PBAs, suggesting that they were in favor of it. And when you think about it, it just makes sense, because it protects an officer who's doing his or her job as it should be done, and yet it also protects the community from officers who perhaps are not fit to be on the job.
Sure. So with that said, there's something else I want to get to also, because I know that you probably speak a lot of places and go a lot of different places.
yes,
And there's so many others, like myself, like you, who have had this, happen. And it's happening all over the country, right? So we know one is not greater or less than the other. It's across the board, and we're all affected by it. So now, what do you see when we come back from this break? I want you to think about, besides moving forward with legislation, legislatively with this, having this accountability with the outside or independent arbitrator, what else can we do? I want you to think about that. And then also, because I know time is winding, also as far as other elected officials, whether they're people of color or not, we need to find out who is making a stand for all of what goes on, especially in this county, but just in general. Is that okay?
It's fine with me.
All right. And we will be right back. I'm still the host. And thank you for watching us and listening to this sensitive item. But it's important to you because you're part of this community. You're part of this region, this nation, our world, because it's happening all over the globe. What we're talking about, killings, unnecessary killings by authorities, nonetheless. Those that we trust or who take oath to uphold, to protect, and to uphold our citizens. We'll be right back.
Broken AC, $4,600. Water heater, $1,500. Fridge on the fritz, $1,000. You won't pay any of that when you have home warranty coverage from the Home Service Club. They'll repair or replace your covered home appliances and systems for around $1 a day.
HSC provides coverage of up to 47 different appliances and systems in your home.
Call the number on your screen now. Get a month free plus $75 off your first year HSC home warranty. No worries, just service.
Are you behind on your mortgage? Is the bank threatening to take your home? Are you considering trying to get a loan modification on your own? Did you know that less than 5% of people who tried on their own actually got a modification? At the Mortgage Modification Helpline, we know the rules and regulations banks don't want you to know about, and we've helped thousands of people stay in their homes. So call the Mortgage Modification Helpline today.
Please call 800-650-2047.
Okay, we're back. Now we got a few minutes, and I know you thought about the question. So we can go with you first, attorney, and then have you do closing remarks. Is that all right?
That's fine.
Okay. Please.
Well, I think that some of the things we need to do is we need to remember that police are members of the community. So when we start talking about building the bridge between police and community, really, I think that it should not be the dynamic. The dynamic should be that the police really do live in the community. Ideally, they're paid enough money where they can be in the community, and where they are people that they are policing are people that they're familiar with, and that we realize that if you have good policing, we all win. If police interact with people in a respectful way, and it's got to go both ways, of course, then we always win. But we have to realize that police are human beings just like the rest of us. And toward that end, you can't shield them from responsibility because they happen to have a difficult job or because they wear a badge and have a gun. So basically, we're asking for accountability across the board.
Sure, absolutely.
The same thing that we would ask of anyone else. We're asking for law enforcement to be in a position where they are trained properly, where they receive enough training so that they can deal with someone who may have mental health issues, but also so that they are not responsible for dealing with that person in their entirety, that you'll also have funding of mental health services.
Sure, and not be so militant.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
I'm going to give you the rest of the time.
Wow.
You got about 2 minutes, but I want you to do something really for me. I want you to look into the camera. Okay, and I want you to share your heart in whatever way that you want, because this is your voice, okay, on Total Faith. And I'll let you know how much time you got. But I want you to please talk to somebody who's watching who may have had a similar situation, but they don't know what to do.
Well, but before I do that, I want to simply address our elected officials and as well as our community leaders. There's so much more we could be doing in this fight. We a lot of times we claim to be men and women of God, and I will say, well, if that's the case, then you have a moral obligation to stand up and speak out against injustice. There are far too many families who are going through this, who have experienced this, and sadly enough, it's not your problem until it's your problem. And then you look for people to come out and help you. Remember, these families did not ask for this fight. We were called to it to a degree. Mm-hmm. So I stand on this front line and I fight every day. And when I think back about some of the obstacles that I faced and some of the things that really saddened me is that, to go back to our elected officials, there were instances and things that happened in this case that our elected officials were not outraged about. How can you sit back when they talk about the killing of a 68-year-old man in their home and a racial slur hurled at him moments before he's killed. And it's not denied that there was a use of the racial slur, but what it was said was that the racial slur was used as a tactic to distract a black man. Never in my life have I heard such a thing, that a racial slur was used to distract anyone. And there was no outrage from our elected officials at all. People just accepted that. To the community, we cannot expect to hold law enforcement or our elected officials accountable if we don't hold ourselves accountable. We do that by getting out there and policing our own communities. These are the things that we need to do in order to make our communities better. And we need to come out, we need to attend common council meetings, we need to attend legislative meetings. And if we do these things, we can affect the change that's so desperately needed out here. I would just simply urge people, if you don't know which direction to go to, we are still working on the Rebuilding Trust Initiative with the Urban League of Westchester. Come by there. Ask how you can help, what it is that you can do. We're located at 61 Mitchell Place in White Plains, New York. And I'm sure that someone will be there to assist you and steer you in the right direction.
Thank you so much, Kenneth, for that. And I just want to add to that, you know, we need to encourage everyone to vote, even though they're trying to stop the vote. That's why they're trying to do all these different tactics to keep people from being able to vote, because they know how important the vote really is. It's really important, because to win, when elected officials are winning with 5 votes, and
you have to educate yourself about the issues and about who the candidates are too. So you've got to know
thank
what
you
you're voting
both.
for.
I want to thank you. Thank you so much,
you.
Kenneth. Hopefully you can come back again.
Sure.
Maybe we'll
Thank you.
talk about some more stuff. Okay. But thank you for tuning in again. For more information and to see more about what Total Faith is all about, go to www.totalfaithnetwork.com. And again, you know, go to the Contact Us form, fill it out, reach out to us, send us your comments, your suggestions, and, you know, whatever it is that you want us to hear. Maybe you have a story to tell. Nonetheless, as I always say, and I want you to really receive this, everyone wins at TFN. Your voice needs to be heard. And as I close out every show, we at Total Faith walk in total faith. Until next time.
Come on, get your hands up. Everybody sing it out. This is how we live it. The total faith